Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're heading into the medieval world. Not the shining castles, not the knights in questionable armor, but the people who actually made up 90% of society, the peasants. The men and women who lived, worked, froze, and occasionally smelled like a goat, which was normal, and honestly, not even the worst smell of the Middle Ages. So dim the lights, pull your blanket up, and let's drift into the fields, the huts, and the smoky hearths of medieval Europe. A world where winter wasn't just inconvenient, it was survival itself. Now, let's be honest. Most people today panic if the thermostat dips below 65. Medieval peasants? They didn't even have glass windows. If you were lucky, you had oiled parchment stretched over the wooden frame, which is like trying to warm your house with a damp lampshade. Wind, snow, and occasionally bugs could slip right in. So, the peasant house was not what we'd call energy efficient. The houses themselves were usually one-room affairs. Wattle and daub walls, thatched roofs, dirt floors. Yes, dirt. Forget your hardwood aesthetic. This was mud, straw, and the occasional chicken wandering through like it paid rent. Privacy was not a thing. The whole family, sometimes multiple generations, all lived in that single smoky space, which is cozy in theory until someone snores or the pig rooting in the corner decides to contribute to the atmosphere. Now, how did they actually stay warm? Fire. And not the Instagram-friendly hygge fireplace fire, but a central hearth with no chimney. The smoke simply drifted up and lingered. So, yes, peasants technically had heating. They also had lungs full of smoke year-round. On the upside, the constant fumigation probably killed a few parasites. On the downside, chronic coughs were basically part of the soundtrack of medieval life. At night, peasants relied heavily on layers. Linen shirts, woolen tunics, cloaks if you were lucky. Wool was everything. It was scratchy, it smelled vaguely like wet sheep, but it was warm. And if you didn't have enough wool, well, you used straw. Yes, straw bedding was the go-to insulation. You stuffed a mattress sack with straw and hoped the mice weren't feeling adventurous. Comfort was relative, but the real medieval heating system was the family bed. Everyone piled in together. Parents, children, sometimes grandparents. If you were really poor, the livestock might join too, because a cow in the house means free heating. Not ideal for romance, but excellent for body heat. And yes, medieval people were perfectly aware this was not glamorous. But when it's January and your roof is one strong gust away from flying into the neighbor's field, you stop caring about glamour. Food also mattered for warmth. Winter diets were bleak. Fresh vegetables were a distant memory. It was bread, porridge, and preserved foods like salted pork or dried beans. The bread was dense, heavy, and filling. Basically a medieval version of a heating pad. Peasants drank ale or weak beer with almost every meal because water wasn't exactly trustworthy. And yes, the beer was warm. Cold beer was not a thing. Though, considering it was basically half-fermented cereal mush, you probably weren't savoring it anyway. And let's talk about sleep itself. Darkness was absolute. No streetlights, no glow from your phone. Just pitch black, broken only by the faint orange of the hearth. Peasants typically went to bed early in winter because what else was there to do? But they also experienced what's called segmented sleep. They'd sleep a few hours, wake up in the middle of the night, tend the fire, maybe pray, or chat quietly, then go back for a second sleep. So, if you're someone who wakes up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, congratulations, you're basically medieval. Of course, all of this assumes you had a roof at all. Many peasants were tenants, at the mercy of landlords. Houses could be flimsy, repairs ignored. If your roof caved in under snow, you simply lived with it until spring. Complaining to your lord would get you about as far as asking your internet provider to care about your Wi-Fi. Now, peasants weren't entirely helpless. Communities supported each other. If someone was freezing or starving, neighbors would often pitch in. Charity was a survival tool, not just a nice gesture. And the church played a role too. Monasteries gave out alms, food, or even shelter. Of course, they also reminded you that your suffering was part of God's plan, which is less helpful when you're shivering under a damp wool blanket. Winter also meant less farm work. Fields were frozen, days were short, so peasants turned to indoor tasks. Spinning wool, mending tools, brewing ale. It was the medieval version of winter hobbies. Except instead of crochet, it was making sure your only tunic didn't literally fall off your back. Now, let's drift a little deeper into the personal lives. Because survival wasn't just physical, it was social. Winters were long, cramped, and boring. Tensions flared. Families argued. Records from manorial courts show plenty of winter disputes, quarrels, thefts, even assaults. Cabin fever was real. Imagine being stuck in one smoky room for months with your in-laws. Medieval life didn't come with noise-canceling headphones, but there was also festivity. Winter was when holidays came alive. Christmas, Twelfth Night, Carnival. Peasants clung to feasts as a break from monotony. Lords were often expected to host or distribute food, which means, for at least a few nights a year, peasants could eat more than just porridge and bread. Spiced pies, roasted meats, ale flowing freely. The memories of those feasts carried them through the bleakest days. And we shouldn't forget the sheer resilience of these people. They adapted, they layered, they survived winters without central heating, dental care, or Netflix. And yet, their communities endured for centuries. But let's not romanticize too much. Peasant life expectancy wasn't great. Many didn't make it past 40. Disease, famine, and childbirth complications were constant threats. And winter only made it harder. If you got sick in January, good luck. Physicians were rare, medicine was primitive, and warm chicken soup was more like cold cabbage broth. Still, peasants weren't passive sufferers. They had traditions, remedies, charms. Heating stones warmed by the fire were slipped into beds. Herbal teas were brewed for colds. Amulets were worn for protection. Were they effective? Probably not. But in a world where your main defense against pneumonia was hope, you clung to whatever gave comfort. So, would you last a night as a medieval peasant in winter? Probably not. Your mattress is too soft, your teeth too used to sugar, and your patience for smoke inhalation too low. But for them, it was normal, endurable, and just part of the cycle of life. Let's float now, away from the peasants. Because while they were busy freezing in smoky huts, the elites were having their own problems. And surprisingly, many of those were just as uncomfortable, only with more velvet involved.